Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto sucheroye lahri sanmiao sanputoshe. Wu shang shen shen wei miao fa, bai qian wan jue nan zao yu. 我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。 Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Shifu Shangren, Venerable Master Dharma friends, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Hung Shur. Today is Sunday, January 17th here in the Gold Coast of Queensland. We're Saturday the 16th in Northern California. Welcome to our sutra lecture on the Flower Garland Sutra's 10th stage, 10 stages chapter of the Huayan Jing. I'm warming my voice up here. We're going to be looking into the mountains today. Our topic is mountains and what the mountains have to tell us about bodhisattvas. And the mountains that we're going to look into are, it's this funny place where they're spiritual mountains. They're part of the Buddhist cosmology, which is to say ordinary eyes like mine can't see these mountains. And yet the Buddha describes them. He talks about them in the sutra as if they are just as evident as Mount Rainier outside Seattle, right? As, Clingman's Dome outside of Atlanta. Is that Clingman's Dome? No. Granite Mountain? What's outside of Atlanta? So these are real mountains if your eyes can see them. And the pinch, the pressure, what happens because men and women throughout history who have awakened to the Tao, who have used the Buddha's practices to wake up and get enlightened, all say, yeah, they're really there. Don't doubt it for a minute. They're really there. So, okay, so we who are looking into this sutra have to proceed with these two approaches, two attitudes in balance. One is healthy skepticism, which is to say, I don't see them. On the other is open-minded willingness to learn more and trust that the Buddha is explaining for us so that when we remove the things that cover our eyes, the truth will be evident to us. So, can you perform that balance? Can you walk that tightrope? If so, it makes a really, to my mind, fun, engaging bit of mental agility that we bring to these sutras. They're magical, they're spiritual, they're inconceivable, and at the same time, they're as practical, as pragmatic as instructions that come with your coffee table that you have to pull out of the box and build, right? You better get the instructions right or else your coffee table is going to fall over. So it's just that practical, just that magical at the same time. Okay, here we go. This is our beginning. We do an invocation when we start, inviting the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the Flower Garland Treasury, Flower Garland Assembly, to draw near and to bless us. So if you'd like to put your palms together, that's appropriate. If you are just interested in observing, that's perfectly appropriate. Here we go. Namo One more time. We're going to scoot down to our passage of text for today. We are nearly done with the prose section of the chapter, and we're going to jump from there into the verses. And the verses are substantial. There's a lot of verses. And when we get to the verses, we're going to be chanting. How it works, don't know yet. We're going to work it out. Okay, let's jump in here. We are at the神仙山王, king of mountains known as spiritual immortal. That's where we are. Here's our text right there. Oh, nice and big. Okay, ready? 佛子如神仙山王，群宝所成，五通神仙显著其中，无有穷尽。菩萨所住言会地，亦复如是。一切道中，殊胜智慧显在其中，说不可尽。Disciples of the Buddha, just as the king of mountains, spiritual immortal, is entirely composed of jewels, and spiritual immortals with 5 powers all abide ceaselessly within it. The Bodhisattvas abiding on the stage of blazing wisdom is the same way. The wisdom of utmost supremacy in all paths exists within it, more than could be described. What are we doing? We're looking at the 10th stage of the 10 stages. The last one, the summum bonum, the magna, can you have magna and summa together? It's summa, right? This is the highest of the 10. It's describing a bodhisattva of that 10th stage. And in order to talk about what this bodhisattva is able to do, Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva, our narrator, is bringing up 10 mountains. And he goes through all 10, aiming for the 10th. The point is he wants to describe the 10th, and to get there, he's going to take the long road. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to get there. Now, there are some layers stitched in here, which is he's also including 10 paramitas, 10 perfections, the 10 ways across, which he links 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. First stage bodhisattva, first paramita, and a mountain. Okay, so that's what we're weaving, kind of weaving these together. And in order to visualize all that, I made a database here. 10 Buddhist mountains and 10 paramitas. The first one is called what? We did it last week. It is called Shi Shan Wang, Himalaya Giriraja. What is Himalaya? Did you know that the Himalayas here on planet Earth mean snowy mountains, mountains of snow? And among the paramitas, the first stage, among the 10 stages, this is the stage of happiness. We're at the 10th one, Dharma cloud, but if you remember 5 years back when we touched it, it was the stage of happiness. The paramita is the perfection of giving and generosity. All right, just, why do this? Because they're weaving 3 things together. The bodhisattvas are doing that. So I think it's helpful to kind of just see it all on a single page to keep track. Number 2 was called Incense Mountain. And in Sanskrit, it's Gandha Madana Giriraja, fragrance, incense. Xiang Shan Wang. This is the second stage, and it's undefiled, is the name of the second stage. Happiness, number 1, undefiled, or leaving defilement behind. You could also translate it that way. Paramita is number 2, Shila, Paramita, the precepts, morality. Okay? And it is full of precepts and deportment practices. Number 3 was where we stopped last week. Bi To Li, Shanwang, Vaidari, Giriraja. Vaidari, shining light is the name of the stage. Patience is the perfection. And what do we do there? We go through the dhyanas, go through liberations and spiritual powers. Okay. Is that a lot? Yeah, it's a lot. But this is the Avatamsaka, and we got 10 to go. We're only on 3. Fasten your seatbelts. Get some more popcorn. So people will recall, if you've been with us, that the 10 stages always follow a kind of a package design. Their structure is the same throughout. It begins with a request. Please tell us the story. Tell us the sacred stories, please. And there's usually a description. The camera kind of goes left and right to show you where you are, a locating shot. Then Moon of Liberation makes a request. Vajra Treasury says, okay, here we go. And he looks back, he says the previous, if we're on 3, he says there's number 2. That's what we learned on number 2 was morality. Good and evil, cause and effect. Now we're in 3. He gives us the name, blazing light. Fa Guang Di, it's called, emitting light. And then he says some basic stuff about this stage, which is different. Then there's a little, I want to say sometimes it's a skit. You know what a skit, S-K-I-T, a skit is? A little play with hypothetical characters. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's presented as a dialogue. There's various ways that it gives us the heartbeat of the stage. So the real juice. If we were meat eaters, we'd say meat and potatoes. We're not, so we say the broccoli and tofu of this stage comes next. This is where it is. And it's in the 3rd stage. What is it? It's psychic powers and samadhis. Oh my goodness. And it describes what are shantong in a way that I've never heard it explained so clearly before. And there's all kinds of, we spend a lot of time talking about how people misuse, misunderstand, abuse shantong, psychic powers, these psychic abilities, right? And here, from the Bodhisattva's point of view, from the Avatamsaka Sutra's point of view, we get it laid out. What does it mean when you can extend your ears into the heavens and down to the hells? What does it mean when you can extend your vision up to the peak of the Dharma realm and all the way around? What does it mean when you know your past lives down to who you were, what was your surname, what street did you live on, what did you have for lunch 1,000 million lifetimes ago? And the sutra says exactly that, right? What does it mean to say that you can walk on water as if it were solid and dive into rock as if it were liquid, reach your hand up and touch the sun and the moon, make flames come out of the bottom of your body and water come out of the top of your body, right? That's another psychic power. These are the psychic powers that it describes. Then the last one that it goes into, it doesn't give us 6, it gives us 5, right? it says there's the knowledge of others' thoughts. And with this ability, you are hyper cognizant. You are not clairvoyant. What is knowledge of thoughts? You're able to, there's a technical term for that, but you're able to know exactly what people are thinking, not just people, but all living beings. You can perceive the thoughts of other beings, animals, for example. So, how fascinating, right? That's the third ground. Then, what's next? Then it goes into what we call boilerplate, and it says this Bodhisattva can see this number of Buddhas. They're mostly born in this realm. They are like a pure gold smelted by a jeweler, etc. They give the various repetitive phrases. Then there are verses, and we're done. And then we go on to the next one, right? So if anybody remembers how it went in those, that's the stages, the third of which was called Fa Guang, Shining Light, okay, by Dari. That's number 3. Here's our new one. We just read it. The fourth mountain, which is appearing as our kind of the theme of this part, is called Spiritual Immortals,仙王. That's the name of the mountain. It is the Yanhui Di, the stage of blazing wisdom, Yanhui Di, number 4. And it corresponds to the Paramita, the perfection of Jin, right? Otherwise known as Virya in Sanskrit, known as strength or vigor, real strength, the ability to keep going. Who lives on the mountain called Shenxian? Spiritual immortals do, says our text. That's interesting. So it's giving us a mountain and then taking us into the mountain and showing us who lives there. So it's like, whoa, wait a minute. It's a real mountain then, because it has residents, birds, right? Possums, squirrels, right? And other kind of non-human, non-animal beings. Spiritual immortals live there. That's interesting, all right? And further, what does it say? It's mostly there. It says, the wisdom of supremacy of the Tao. That's a mouthful. Look right here. It says, 一切道中殊胜智慧先在其中. The wisdom that is sublime and special of the Tao fills it up. That's what we find on this mountain. So, unpack that. What would it be? Well, the Tao is kind of like nature the way it is before we think about it or talk about it. It's the way reality is, fresh without passing through our consciousness of it, right? Raw consciousness, raw reality. And the wisdom that accords with that is what you encounter on mountain number 4. So, for example, you have a garden. Anybody like turn to gardening while you're quarantined, while you're locked down? I bet. On your deck, on your, what is it? You open the window and you step out onto your balcony, right? Maybe even on your windowsill. But the joy of watching things grow, there's a certain amount of wisdom involved in doing it well so that the plants thrive. And that wisdom is there to be had. Some people have it. Oh, he's got a green thumb. He's a real gardener. He just looks at it, she just looks at it, and it grows, right? Nah, not really. I mean, yeah, there's some people are totally uninterested in growing stuff. There are people who, it's not a gift. They learned, they watched. They had a grandma. They had an uncle who didn't mind the kid tagging along when they went out to take care of the plants, and they learned, right? So Those people have that wisdom. Imagine if, like the wisdom of the Tao of growing things, you could do that with children. You could do that with parents who are losing their clear wits, aging parents who are heading towards dementia, and you knew exactly what to do. How much, when to tell them no, how hard it is to tell aging parents no when they're misbehaving because they don't know any better anymore. Their minds aren't firing on all cylinders, right? And you would know, because why? You have, what do we call it? Wisdom of supremacy in every path. Wouldn't that be useful? So on this mountain number 4, Bodhisattva does, always knows just what to say, what to do. Yeah. 佛子如由乾陀罗山王春宝所成，夜叉大神显住其中，无有穷尽。菩萨所住南圣地，亦复如是，一切自在如意神通，显在其中，说不可尽。Disciples of the Buddha, just as the king of mountains, Yugandhara, that's a typo, that shouldn't be an M, is entirely composed of jewels, and yakshas and great spirits all abide ceaselessly within it. The Bodhisattvas abiding on the stage of difficult conquest is the same way. All wish-fulfilling spiritual abilities and self-mastery exist within it, more than could be described. What does it say? Mountain number 5, it's hard to pronounce. It's由乾陀罗. The Chinese just made the sounds. They didn't try to capture the Sanskrit. It's Yugandhara in Sanskrit. That M should be a J. And it's made of jewels. And who lives there? Yakshas and great spirits live there constantly. So there's your mountain. Okay, yakshas and great spirits. Make that mountain into an analogy for the 5th Bodhisattva stage, and it's called Nansheng Di, stage of difficult conquest, hard to beat. What does difficult conquest mean? Hard to beat. This 5th stage is called hard to beat. Difficult to win, right? Difficult victory. It's the same way. On the 5th stage, wish-fulfilling spiritual abilities and self-mastery exist there. Okay, following here? Number 5, here we go. Yugandhara. Difficult conquest is the stage. Samadhi is the perfection, the Paramita. Yakshas and great spirits live there, ghost kings and great spirits. And that mountain is full of wish-fulfilling powers and self-mastery. That's what the Bodhisattva stage is. Okay, yakshas are ghosts. They're powerful ghost kings. This is interesting. Somebody, some graduate student somewhere, maybe they've already done it and I'm just behind the curve. Some graduate student of Buddhist studies should do a dissertation on which figures out of Buddhist, you want to say mythology, which figures out of Buddhist writing have been gathered, have been borrowed by computer games. Yakshas is one of them, because they're always presented as scary ghosts. Shifu would call them speedy ghosts, su ji gui, right? They travel quickly, and they are bloodthirsty, and they eat humans and other creatures until they met the Buddha. And after they met the Buddha, they were tame, they were ruly, they were polite. They followed the Buddha because why? They wanted to wake up. They wanted to get enlightened too. So before they were crossed over, before they learned the rules, that identity was picked up largely by computer gamers, writers of computer games, and they were turned into, fierce, snarling figures, along with many other figures. So some grad student is going to have a hit on his hands. It's ready-made. It's waiting there to figure out which figures out of Buddhism. How about the Rakshasas? Rakshasas. They're fierce, blood-eating, life-swelling. They inhale innocent beings, right? How about the Vajra spirits? Jin Gang Li Shi. Oh my goodness.天龙八部. China, starting with Jin Yong, the novelist, Louis Cha, right? He even took the entire pantheon of Buddhist spiritual beings, the gods, the dragons, and the Eightfold Pantheon, turned it into incredibly popular novels in China. So Tianlong Babu, right? So anyway, that's a ready-made thesis for somebody who wants to keep track of that. I would be curious to see a systematic survey of which figures were borrowed and why they appeal. So, our Bodhisattva on the fifth stage, what is he about? Samadhi. Here's where the Bodhisattva really, really uses stillness and focus in order to teach living beings where they are. Right? If you recall the fifth stage, what was the fifth stage about? Our Bodhisattva there is really good with every skill, every worldly art, every technique, such as jewelry, such as architecture, such as music and the arts, such as knowing the health or illness of living beings, medical skills, right? Also logic, intellectual pursuits, right? Also everything that has to do with language. On the fifth stage, with the help of Samadhi, the Bodhisattva masters all of those. So, wish-fulfilling spiritual abilities, self-mastery, 自在神通, that's a number 5. Okay, how are we doing? Everybody following along so far? Doug Powers would say, you all got that much. Right. So far, so good. Okay, I'm going to take a little pause here. Can you all see the mountain on the screen? Now, it's not a big mountain, it's a small mountain, but it's still a mountain. This is Feilai Feng in Hangzhou, just outside Yingyan Monastery. And mountains are one of the joys of our planet Earth. And I was raised in northwestern Ohio, flat as a pancake. Northwestern Ohio used to be a lake bottom, Lake Erie. And the lake bottom didn't have mountains, it was flat. Lake Erie is a particularly shallow lake, one of the Great Lakes. So I never seen a mountain. We would drive into Michigan, and they had the Irish Hills in Michigan, which are these gentle rolling. And then when you went up to the Upper Peninsula, there were fairly, slightly larger. But it took my first trip back to my father's native home, which was, as they say, La Belle Province de Québec, beautiful province of Québec, French Canada, which is just north of the Green Mountains of Vermont and the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Both cross over the Canadian border as part of the Laurentian Shield, which is the geological surface of Ontario and Quebec, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. So I went on summers to my father's home and saw mountains for the first time, and immediately knew that my heart belonged to mountains. Just the ability to look up, to see the top instead of just looking flat across. The tallest thing in northwestern Ohio is a telephone pole, right, or a grain silo. Nothing taller. You go to Vermont and you look at the long trail and you look up, and the mountains are 6,000 feet, which is, as far as mountains go, is not so tall, right? In Colorado, mountains run 14,000 and above. And of course, the Sierras are taller still. Colorado, Rockies, and Sierras. But on the eastern seaboard, these mountains are old and they are soft. They've been pulverized down and moss has grown and the trees are old. And I remember my first encounter with mountains was so blissful because the ground was not flat. It looked like this. When you took the effort, started out in the morning at the trailhead and walked up, took about 4 or 5 hours to get up 4,000, 5,000 feet, and you looked out, you saw this, mountaintops. These are the Appalachians. When they cross into New England, they become the Green Mountains. You're looking at the Green Mountains of Vermont and the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And then Maine has another strain, that's the Appalachians. So how beautiful, green and soft. And when you set foot into the mountains, you see this kind of light, this kind of energy, misty and spiritual and soft. They're soft mountains, if you can appreciate what that might mean. Here they are. Now, this gentleman, I don't know who he is, and I'm borrowing his photos, thank you. He is doing what's called trail bounding, coming down. You're looking at the trail. That may be the long trail. The long trail runs vertically, south to north, north back to south, in the Green Mountains of Vermont. And it's preserved by the Green Mountain Club, which are volunteers and some professionals who keep the trail clean and stocked and operative. And when you go, the joy that I discovered then, when I came back as a student for 3 summers to Middlebury College, we would take the weekends and go out into the mountains. And the joy is called trail bounding. And you take the effort to go up, but when you're ready to come back, notice that there's lots of rocks, lots of moss, blueberries, trees, occasional creeks and rivers with running water. You start at the top and you launch yourself out. And you keep your feet flexed, kind of like shock absorbers. And this foot hits a rock and bounces, and then this foot hits the dirt and then bounces. And you have to coordinate your eyes and your feet. You have to put your eyes in your feet. You can't think. There's no time to think. You just respond going down the trail, bonk, 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 bonk. And you go down twice as fast as you went up, because going up is a lot of sweat, right? A lot of effort. But as you go down, you bound down over the trail, and you spend more time in the air than you do with your feet in contact with the rocks. It's a wonderful way to descend the trails. You go fast, and it's not. Of course, it is dangerous in that if you lose your footing, you could hit the rocks and break a rib or something, or break your ankle. But somehow, the steep, the angle of the slope and the softness of the mountains doesn't give you a sense of danger. It gives you a feeling of harmony and exhilaration to bound down the long trail or the Appalachian Trail in these soft, gentle mountains that never get higher than 6,000 feet. I guess Mount Washington is the tallest in New Hampshire, and it's 7,000 feet. That's tall and cold, but the Green Mountains are very gentle and conducive. So coming from the flatlands of northwestern Ohio to the Green Mountains and bounding down the long trail in the summer of Vermont is one of my favorite memories of growing up. How delightful. So we're back in the mountains, and we are looking at number 6, and number 6 is a very important, significant stage of the Bodhisattva's 10 stages. We ready? 佛子如马耳山王，春宝所成，一切诸果，咸在其中，取不可尽。菩萨所住现前地，亦复如是。入缘其理，声闻果证，咸在其中，说不可尽。Disciples of the Buddha, just as the King of Mountains, horse ear, is entirely composed of jewels, and all fruits are found within it in endless quantity, the Bodhisattvas abiding on the stage of manifestation is the same way. Realization of the result of voice hearer and mastery of the principle of conditioned arising are all within it, more than could be described. Okay, so number 6. This is the 6th stage, the 6th Paramita, and some very interesting stuff is here that is found only here. What's next? Look. Ma'arshan Ashvakarna Giriraja is the name of the Sanskrit. Horse ear, literally, ear of horse. It's the Xian, Qian, Di, the stage of manifestation or appearances, you could also translate. It is the 6th paramita, the paramita of prajna, wisdom. Oh boy. I'm gonna make that different, and we're gonna go in 1. Did it. Here we go. Spelled it right. Okay. Who lives there? Fruits. All kinds of fruits are available. Is it like apples and peaches and pears and jackfruit and durian? Probably no durian. Probably none. But I think so. I think it could be fruit, it could be fruition. All kinds of accomplishment. 成果. Or 果实, maybe. Maybe it's fruit like, mangoes. Or maybe it's fruit like results, accomplished. But what happens on number 6 are 2 important things. One is, there you become a shengwen, an arhat of the first stage, a voice hearer. And you realize what am I saying? Pratitya samutpada, right? That's the principle of conditioned arising. What's that about? All right. People may remember, it's really fresh in my mind because I didn't expect it. When I started explaining the 10 stages, it was like, this is heavy going, right? This is deep stuff. I don't know if I'm up to it. I don't know if I can. And number 6 was always the real watershed. This was the fence that I had to see if I could get over it, because there's 10 descriptions of the 12 links of conditioned arising, right? 无明缘行，行缘识，识缘名四，名四缘六入, like that. You know, the consciousness conditions activities, ignorance conditions activities, conditions consciousness, consciousness conditions name and form conditions the 6 entrances, right? 6 senses. And 10 times through, it runs it through 10 times. And I was kind of gee whiz, and I remember asked a lot of friends for their take on it, did a lot of background reading. But, and equally complicating, equally to this day mystifying, is there's a parallel commentary on these 12 links that links them to the development of a baby in a fetus, the development of a fetus in a womb. There's that whole parallel description. I was like, am I supposed to explain that? So I've looked at Master Hua, his explanation a lot, you know. It's like I depended on Shifu's commentary, Master Chengguan, the Tang Dynasty commentary. And I remember there was one lecture at Berkeley one night when I was floundering a bit. I had to say, I wasn't confident that I was doing justice to this material. And I guess it was through meditation. I was meditating, and it kind of gelled, click, you know, like a lens coming into focus. And I realized this was a creation story. This is Buddhism's creation story, one of Buddhism's creation stories. It's talking about how reality comes into being and we perceive it. So it's about epistemology, how we know what we know, and how things appear. This is how they're made. And my dissertation chairman, Professor Nakasone, of bless his heart, Ron Nakasone is himself a Buddhist scholar from Wisconsin who studied the Avatamsaka from the point of view of the Japanese Pure Land, Jodo Shinshu, looking at the Avatamsaka. And he said, many scholars consider Pratitya Samutpada the Buddha's foremost contribution to learned discourse, to understanding the Buddha's foremost contribution to civilization. That by talking about 十二因缘法, taking it from his meditation and saying, these are the 12 steps that happen before birth and death take us into suffering. If you can understand those, you leave suffering. Ron Nakasone said that was the Buddha's foremost contribution. Now, that's a particular scholar's that's a scholastic point of view. I think I would balance that with saying explaining the limitless Dharma realm, the flower treasure world system is equally important. I don't want to say one is the most important, and you can't. Then probably the Dharma flower, this Dharma Pundarika, describing that all living beings have the Buddha nature and all can become Buddhas is equally important. However, if you are working with the Pali tradition and the notion of arhats leave birth and death, Pacceka Buddhas advance more deeply into that awareness, Bodhisattvas make the Bodhi resolve, and Tathagatas bring it to perfection, then this sixth stage is about creation. This is the Buddha's capturing, it's as if he opened a window on the engine of creation that is in the human mind. Or you could say inner nature probably is a better. Or 本性, right? And he slid a little window open, and here it was operating. Here were the gears turning, the pulleys, the belts, the smoke coming up, puff, puff, puff as the wheels turned. And we were creating a reality that leads us into being born, takes us out into death, and makes us suffer. 生老病死苦 is right here, right? And also, then the potential to transcend it is right here. So that was like, when I saw that, it was like, oh, that's what's going on. I don't have to be afraid of this. Let's put that lens on the camera and take another look. And just by doing that, suddenly it's like, oh man, yes, this is a creation story. And so much, that opened so many doors. I remember that. Because why? When it's a creation story, are there other creation stories available to us in Western culture? Oh yes, there are. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and His voice was heard upon the waters, and and on the seventh day He rested. Founding narratives of Western culture are there, and the Buddhists, let's see here, back in order. The Buddhists have their own, right? Okay, network status in red, unstable in yellow. So, how interesting, right? We've got, and to see it this way is like suddenly this comes alive. You go, oh my goodness, let me take another look at that. That's really cool. Powerful, powerful story that arises where? Not from a narrative tradition. God says so. God told the prophet how it is. No, it's when we sit down, having disciplined our wild nature through the precepts, the Buddhist description of things to avoid if we want to deeply enter samadhi. If we apply that to our bodies and minds, what happens is arhatship and the second level of solitary awakened beings. We end birth and death. Not only do we have creation in the palm of our hand, we have the end of creation. It's creation beyond ignorance, right? So, how cool is that? Very powerful. If I'm whetting anybody's, I know I just had an image of some of my friends I know who are out there listening and meditating in Shanghai and meditating in Florida and meditating in Canada, and who are thinking, really, is that it? And I'm going to caution you, is that the word? I'm going to tell you in advance, the language of Di Liu, the sixth stage, is kind of formulas. There are 10 versions of Wu Ming Yuan Xing, Xing Yuan Shi, right? Ignorance conditions activities, activities conditions consciousness. The word that was key, from my understanding, my new understanding of what's going on in the sixth stage was yuan, that word yuan. We say conditions. What is it to condition something? Another way to translate that's helpful is pulls along. Yanks, right? Tugs. Like you tug this and the whole fabric, right? Tug the sleeve and it comes along. That's what yuan. And when the other side of it, once you get a handle on it, it's Wu Ming Mie Ji Xing Mie. 行灭即失灭, right? 灭 means done. When ignorance is done, there's no more activities. When activities end or done, then consciousness is done. And there's liberation. 生老病死, lao bei you ku is done. Right? All the suffering is done. So that was really, really helpful. And if anybody wants to dig in, go find a copy of the Huayan Jing. Read it in Chinese if you can, read it in English if you can. And you're looking for 第六地, 现前地. It's creation story. Okay. That's on the 6th stage. What's next? What's next? 加油,加油. 如尼民陀罗山王春宝所成大力龙神，悬住其中，无有穷尽。菩萨所住圆形地，亦复如是。方便智慧，独觉果证，闲在其中，说不可尽。Just as the king of mountains, Nemindhara, is entirely composed of jewels, and dragon spirits with great power abide within it ceaselessly, the Bodhisattvas abiding upon the stage of traveling far is the same way. The Bodhisattva has expedient wisdom and realization of the fruition of a solitary awakened one more than could be described. Okay. Let's look at our chart here. Nimin Tolo Shanwang, Nemindhara. The stage is called Yuanxing, long journey, long travels, distant travels. It is the expedient Paramita. 方便波罗蜜, 方便波罗蜜. Dragon spirits with great power. Ooh, a mountain with dragon spirits on it. Cool. That launched how many novels that people are consuming under lockdown, right? Just reading all these great romance novels full of dragon spirits. And this is where the独觉必之佛, the Pracheka Buddha, right, is staying. That's where they stay. All right. Now, this is the 7th stage, and many people, are familiar with the 6 paramitas. When we get to the Avatamsaka, we have 4 more. Fangbian, Bolomi, is the first one, Paramita. And here, our Bodhisattva is involved in communication and teaching and studies of Dharma because number 8 is coming. And our experience with the 8th stage was so profound. I'm going to go right to number 8 because 7 and 8 tend to come together. Are we ready? Here we go. 如着揭罗山王春宝所成，诸自在众闲住其中，无有穷尽。菩萨所住不动地，亦复如是。一切菩萨自在横痴别世界，闲在其中，说不可尽。Here we go. Just as the king of mountains Chakravada is entirely composed of jewels, and multitudes of sovereign beings abide within it ceaselessly, so too is the Bodhisattvas abiding upon the unmoving stage. The sovereign travels of Bodhisattvas in differentiated worlds, systems, are all within it, more than could be described. Okay. This is called Chakravada, wheel turner. It's composed of jewels, like the last 5. And sovereign beings, 自在众生, are there. Sovereign here just means do what they want. They're not pressured by bad health. They're not pressured by old age. They're not pressured by poverty. They're not pressured by bigotry or voter suppression. They do as they please, right? Our Bodhisattva on the unmoving stage is the same way. The travels, the yuanxing, 自在横, the sovereign practices of Bodhisattvas in these world systems are there. You can't describe them to an end. There are too many. And here we are. We're in a wheel turner, Chakravada, immovable, budongdi, strength. This is the Bala Paramita, the perfection of Li Bolomi. Sovereign beings live there, and Bodhisattva sovereign practices are there. So you'll recall, I hope, if you don't, I hope you go back and look it up because it's really, really amazing. On the 8th stage, the Bodhisattva realizes what is called Wu Gong Yong Hang. It's called sovereign practices in practices that are effortless practice. And remember, our Bodhisattva described, there's this wonderful analogy of the person who is moving through the woods with a boat on his back. He's carrying a boat on his back. And every step is burdensome, labored, and exhausting, and sweaty, tiring, right? And makes real slow progress. This is analogous to cultivation from the first Bodhi resolve all the way to the 8th stage. That's what it's like. And the sutra says, right, cultivation's hard. You have to stick to it. You sweat. It's not easy at all. At the 8th stage, says our analogy, the Bodhisattva takes the boat, turns it over, hoists a sail, gets in the boat, puts his hand on the tiller, or her hand on the tiller, the wind fills the sail, and you go across the lake, effortlessly. And you make up in 1 hour all of the work it took from the first resolve to the 8th stage in an hour. Go smoothly, effortlessly, sailing across the water under the wind, power of wind. That's the effect of Wu Gong Yong Heng, practices, effortless practices. What it amounts to is the Bodhisattva now is involved in teaching. He is called a Fa Shi and a Da Fa Shi. He's able to teach. And his efforts come to fruition, right? That's the 8th stage. Immobility, immovability, right? 不动地. Number 9. 如计度山王，春宝所成，大威德修罗王，现在其中，无有穷尽。菩萨所住善慧地，亦复如是。一切世间生灭智恒，现在其中，说不可尽。Just as the king of mountains, Ketumati, is entirely composed of jewels, and Asura kings of great awesome virtue all abide within it ceaselessly, so too is the Bodhisattva abiding on the stage of wholesome wisdom. All mundane wisdom practices of knowledge about creation and destruction are within it, more than could be described. Okay, people will recall the Da Fa Shi, the great Dharma master who is so good at explaining the Dharma that he can never be defeated. Asura kings live here, interestingly, and they're virtuous Asura kings as well, which is kind of interesting. Ketumati, skillful wisdom, Shanhui Di, the vow, Yuan Bolomi, the Paramita of vows. Asura kings live there, and practices of creation and destruction. On the ninth stage, our Bodhisattva's vision is vast, really, really vast. He can see how worlds come into being, abide, decay, go void, go away, and then return, right? He's got a view that goes beyond petty victories and defeats, right? So that is the ninth stage. And it's made of jewels, and Asuras are there. They're not fighting Asuras, they're virtuous Asuras. So this is the stage of wholesome wisdom. We have one more to go, and I want to go right to it because it is our 10th stage. This is where we are right now in our studies of the 10th stages. Ready? 如须弥路山王春宝所成，大威的诸天显住其中，无有穷尽。菩萨所住法云地，亦复如是。如来力无畏不共法，一切佛事显在其中，问答宣说不可穷尽。Just as the king of mountains, Sumeru, is entirely composed of jewels, and gods of great awesome virtue abide within it, ceaselessly, so too is the Bodhisattvas abiding on the stage of the Dharma cloud. The Tathagata's powers, fearlessnesses, and special dharmas, the deeds of a Buddha, are all within it. If you investigated using questions and answers, statements, or explanations, you would still find the topic inexhaustible. All right. Now, interestingly, this is maybe if we didn't know any of these other mountains, maybe we knew Himalayas because there's a earth-based mountain range called the Himalayas. Mount Everest is there. Maybe we knew that one. But if we knew any Buddhist geography, this would be the one, Sumeru, right? Shumishan. In the Pali tradition, they call it Sumeru, same mountain. Buddha says, really there? You don't see it? Oh, well, meditate more. You'll see it. It's in the center. It is the polar mountain. Sun and moon, 4 continents, oceans of fragrant water, wheel ring mountains surrounding, Sumeru in the center. And what's it like? Halfway up Mount Sumeru is the heavens of the 4 kings. 四天王, Tian is on Ban Shan Yao. It's halfway up, the heaven of the 4 kings. The heaven of the 33 gods, Sansha San Tian, Traya Streamsha, Dao Li Tian, that is on the top of Mount Sumeru. And it's a funny mountain. It's an inverted cone, right? It's narrower at the base than it is at the top. Interesting. So that's where Chakra Devanam Indra, the known far and wide as Lord God, right? God the Father, Lord. He lives on Mount Sumeru on the top. But above him, once you leave Mount Sumeru, there are 4 more levels of heavens to go. So this is Mount Sumeru. And you think, well, good story. Don't buy it. Never seen it. Nobody I know has seen it. All right, that's okay. No, you know, how we deal with new information is a personal thing. I find it much more enjoyable to keep my mind open and to say the number of things that exist that I haven't seen or heard are many, are legend. Languages, for example. I do not speak Greek. I do not speak Cantonese. I know they exist, and there are millions of people who both speak Greek and speak Cantonese. I don't have to know it for it to exist. And I find it pretty arrogant to think that things that I don't know don't exist. That's clearly not true, right? The mind's capacity, the garbage can of the mind is limited capacity. So to have the Buddha say, yes, this mountain is really there. It's in the center, called Mount Sumeru. It's made of jewels, and gods live there. Okay, I'll take it on the Buddha's advice, and when I myself improve the range and capacity of my knowledge intakers with my own sensory apparatus, and when I broaden the measure of my mind, chances are I'll see it too. All right. The Bodhisattva here on the stage of the Dharma cloud has the Tathagata's 10 powers, 4 fearlessnesses, and 18 special Buddha Dharmas. There. That's where this pops up. And there's a lot to learn. It's inexhaustible, says the Buddha. Says Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva, I beg your pardon. Here it is, ready on our handy-dandy chart. Sumeru, Dharma cloud stage, the knowledge paramita, jnana bolomi, zhi bolomi, right? That's the number 4 out of the extra 4 paramitas. Gods of great virtue, like the 4 kings of heaven and chakra are there, and powers, fearless, and special dharmas. They arise when we get to number 10, the 10th stage. So there we go. Okay, we have one more line, and then we'll take a break from the text. 佛子此十宝山王同在大海，识别得名。Disciples of the Buddha, these 10 kings of jewel mountains arise together from the ocean, each with its different name. Good? Good, good? We'll learn more about those next week. I got a story. The names have been changed to protect the not so innocent. In 1989, together with other monks from DRBA, I was honored to be invited to China by Master Mingyang, who was reciprocating from being invited to the U.S. in 1987 for the Shui Lu Kong Fa Hui. Now, we observed a precept transmission, 传戒, at Longhua Si in Shanghai, Dragonflower. This incredibly historical, ancient monastery that had been there since the 6 dynasties, the Liu Chao Shidai, 5th century, basically. It's a 5th century monastery, continuously occupied. There's an entire corner of the city of Shanghai called Dragonflower District from this monastery. So 600 men and women became monks and nuns while we were there. And just outstanding experience, a priceless experience. I had to keep pinching myself. Am I really here seeing this historic moment happen? And after it was over, we had talked to Master Hua on the phone, and of course, at the time, one of the most exciting things to do in Buddhist China was to make a pilgrimage to what are known as the 4 holy mountains. 朝拜四大山, 那个四大山嘛, right? 朝拜四大名山, 四大名山 it's called. And they are Mount Potola, Putoshan, dedicated to Guanyin Bodhisattva in the East China Sea. And where else? Jiuhuashan in Anhui Province, dedicated to Dizangwang Restored Bodhisattva. And Wutaishan, Five Peaks Mountain, dedicated to Manjushri Bodhisattva out in Shanxi province, and Umeishan, Mount Emei, dedicated to Samantabhadra Bodhisattva in Sichuan province. So we asked, could we get on go to see the four holy mountains? And Master Mingyang said, great idea. I would love to make it happen. I have to ask permission. And back then, the Zongjiaoju, the religion department, was very much in charge of any foreign monks traveling in China, right? So they were, Master Mingyang said, let them go. They have earned it. They helped us transmit precepts. We should share the wonders. Grant their wish. This is their wish. They want to see the magic mountains, holy mountains. Come on. So, all right, but only have to be escorted. We have to send handlers with them. Fine, no worries. So we were set up with some young monks who had been to City of 10,000 Buddhas. In fact, some who later had gone to the Berkeley Monastery as well. These were young monks from Shanghai who were students of Master Mingyang. So we went first to Pudoshan, incredible experience. I'll tell you all about it sometime. We went to Jiuhuashan, and because of our orientation from our teacher, we were interested in monks who cultivate, right? 会修行, 老修行, 老修道的法师. We wanted to meet monks who were actually practicing in the traditional ways, not monks who had already accommodated to the urban centers of China. Could we meet some of the real cultivators who we didn't know might still be living in the mountains? Well, the answer was no. No. Because don't know who that would be, couldn't control them. They wanted, from the Chinese point of view, they didn't want anything to happen to us. Having American monks from California touring around the four holy mountains in China out of their control was, it was risky. And they just didn't want anything to go wrong. So better be safe. And the answer was, stay with the group. We'll go to the mountains. We'll tour around, bow to the famous Buddhas, bow to their various famous sites, but don't go off on your own. Right? That was the instruction. And they had sent two handlers from the religion department in Shanghai to make sure that we were safe, right? Two young lawyers, both of them named Wang, and they had to keep their eye on us. Now, we had in our corner the young monks who had been to CTDB for the Water, Land, and Air 2 years earlier, and were also interested in finding the real cultivators. They hadn't had been a pilgrimage so far. They were young and they didn't get out of Shanghai that much. And here they were on a paid vacation or pilgrimage to holy mountains. And so we got together with our young monk handlers, Dharma friends, Tongcan Daoyou, right? Our guides. We said, hey, we may never ever make it back to Jiuhuashan. This is a magic mountain, Earth Store Bodhisattva's mountain. There are miracles that happen here. What do you say? Can we just take an hour or two and go look? He's like, okay, right? Okay. So we went to Jinding on the top of Jiuhuashan, Golden Peak, and it's a real mountain, and you really walk, and it's spectacularly spiritual. This is everybody's image of what a magic Chinese mountain looks like. Mist and craggy peaks that eagles only can fly to. So, finished lunch, Jinding, we're supposed to rest, and we all snuck out. And there were 3 Americans and 2 Chinese Dharma friends, guides. All of us young, all of us like, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed. And we set out beyond the border of Jinding Monastery on Jiuhuashan. And we walked and walked. And there were these narrow trails that kind of petered off into nothing. And we were above the tree line. So there was, little groves of trees, but not a lot growing. It was, you can see when the weather comes, this is hard living, right? And we walked for about an hour and a half, and we're looking at each other and thinking, let's go back. And then I smelled wood smoke. Wood smoke. Somebody was burning wood. It's like, we're all like, oh. And we came around the corner, and here was a man, weathered, not very tall, wearing robes that were sort of monk's robes, but they were more coveralls. And he had shaved his head, he was missing a couple teeth, and he had a big smile. And he said, "Wow, 你们来了，好，过来过来." He said, "Oh, you've come." He says, "Oh, good, come on in." And we're like, who's this, And I could see our two Chinese Dharma friends, bhikshus, were like, we didn't really think we were going to find anybody out here, but what do we do now? And he, "Oh, 没事没事, come on, 过来过来." And we go through a little gap in the bushes that if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it. You wouldn't ever find it. And we go in, and here is a mountain clearing. It's a clearing on the top of the mountain. But over here is gardens that are just a vegetable garden with a covering over it. And the guy says, 来 这里我肯定你没看过. I'm sure you've never seen this before. And he takes us over, and we're like, what's this? And he pulls back this tarp. 这什么东西呢? What is this? And one of the monks goes, "Is that ginseng?" 是啊，很健康了，你看，红杉了。He's growing wild red ginseng, and that's really hard to grow, and it's special conditions. He covers it back up. He says, 不要告诉人啊，我们不让人知道了。Don't tell anybody. We don't want anybody to know about this. Because why? 他们都会来偷了，人家都会偷了。他们一知道他们偷了。Once they know about it, they'll steal it. Don't tell anybody. We won't tell anybody. Count on it. We won't tell anybody. And he says, 过来. He leads us over, and he says, 你看他. Look at him. There's another one. There's another older man, and his skin was dark like this. He wasn't African, he was Chinese, but his skin was so dark from the sun, from living outdoors. And our new friend said, 你不要跟他讲话，他不讲话. He says, don't talk to him. He won't talk to you anyway. He never says anything. 他从来不讲话. And we're like, what have we found here? And he says, okay, na, 你们想你说嘛? Do you want to bow to the Buddha? 想. He says, 好. He led us over to what was kind of like I guess it was their only building, like a hut, a real malpong, right? A real hut. And it had, just sticks woven together with a stick horizontal and lots of sticks vertical, kind of like a door. Just the most crude of shelters. And he opened it up. He says, you can come one by one. So I went in first to bow, and here was an altar, here was a Buddha image, and here was a picture of Xuanhua Shangren. Here was a picture of Shifu, Master Xuanhua, on the altar. And I'm like bowing, and I'm thinking, what have we found here? Bow 3 times, I come out, our other 2 monks bow, and then the 2 Chinese monks bow. And he says, the guy says, 你们是万佛城的吗? He says, you're from City of 10,000 Buddhas, aren't you? We're like, yeah? He says, 对了. He says, 我看见你们了. 我飞过去都看到你们了. He says, I've seen you before. I was flying by and I saw you. He says, we're like, And he says, tell me, he says, I've seen other places. He says, this other place, they have these big wide streets and big gates. He's describing this. He says, huge stone gates and these streets that are so wide and beautiful rivers and bridges. What place is that? He says. And I said, Paris? France? He says, 他们讲的语言呢奇怪，我听不懂，可能是吧? He says, I don't understand a word they say. They're saying funny language. Maybe it's France. Maybe that's Paris. He says, yeah, I saw that too. He says, okay. He says, you guys got to go now. You got to get back in a hurry. Don't let them know that we're here, and we'll see you later, he says. Be sincere in your cultivation. 你们要诚心修道, he said. And he sent us away. And we're going, okay. And we walked out of his clearing, past the little gap in the bushes, and we turned around, and this sounds like the kind of thing you'd say, but I had the feeling that it disappeared. It vanished behind me. I didn't want to turn my head back to look. And we hustled back down the trail. All 5 of us were just like, it's like, what did we just meet? And we got back to Jinding, and here was the lawyer. Here was our religion department handler. Where have you been? Looking at his Chinese charge, our Dharma friend. We were just out for a walk. What did you see? Well, we just, we saw what there was to see on the mountain. What do you think we saw? It's like he didn't care because he was not a Buddhist. He didn't care that we had seen something supremely wonderful in the mountains. He cared that we had broken the rules, that we had disobeyed. And in fact, our friend, our Dharma brother, who was willing to take us to see the cultivators, did in fact get into trouble for his willingness, for his interest, his own personal interest in finding out whether or not there were real cultivators out there, But how wonderful. He told us, he came back and became one of the biggest abbots in China, where he is now. So he was definitely renovated later. But if you think about, right, spiritual immortal mountain,神仙山王, spiritual immortals fill up the mountain, and they discuss the wisdom of supremacy in the Tao. Right? In all the different paths. So, mountains in Buddhism have always been a place of intense spiritual practice. And if you think about that encounter, if you ask Marty Verhoeven, he'll correspond the story I just told. What was Shifu's picture doing on the altar there? How did they know that we came from City of 10,000 Buddhas before we said a word about it? How did we find them in the first place? And where did they go after we left? There were monks, 1989, there were monks in China who flew, you know. They had that ability, so. Pretty amazing, pretty amazing. I wanted to share another story. I don't have time, so I won't, but people will look at this mountain. Where is this? In DRBA, we have another encounter with mountains. This is Castle Mountain. Castle Mountain is right above, it's right in between Banff, Alberta, and Lake Louise, not far from Calgary. Master Hua, when he drove by Castle Mountain, said, oh, Manjushri Bodhisattva has moved. And Weito Bodhisattva is also there. This is where they live. So the nuns at Huayansi, Avatamsaka Monastery in Calgary, regularly drive by Castle Mountain on their way to our new property at Golden, British Columbia. And they're developing it now. So I've walked out on Castle Mountain twice. They go every year to this incredible Rocky Mountain. This is in the Rocky Mountains of Canada, right, in Banff National Park. So we have, and Shifu identified this as a spiritual mountain. So when somebody opens their spiritual vision, they can tell us whether or not Manjushri is really there, or whether he's busy dealing with the rest of our ignorance in this Saha world. So, okay, that's my story for the mountains of the 10th stage. And next week, we get to hear about oceans, qualities of the ocean, 10 qualities of the ocean. And if I always run out of time before the song comes up. If I don't ever sing it, you'll never hear it. Song by Master Hua. The joy of this song is you can do both Chinese and English with the same melody. Here we go. 大放光明转法轮，狮子吼声万世尊，爱流到众生祈愿的，爱成就无上解脱。满大放光明转法轮，大放光明转法轮。The Dharma wheel is turning round. sound, adore liberation. The Dharma wheel is turning around. The wheel is turning around. Shifu wrote this along with Mr. Liu Jisheng in Wanpucheng. This is Master Xuanhua's original song. And it works really well as a round, Lun Chang. We, unfortunately, as a solo singer, even with the banjo, I can't make the round happen. But I just want people to hear it and appreciate what a wonderful songwriter Master Xuanhua was. 放光明转法轮，十字后生万事尊。爱六道众生期望的爱成就无上佛门，大放光明转法轮，大放光明转法轮。The Dharma wheel is turning around. Lion roars his exultation, and living beings who hear the sound attain door of liberation. The Dharma wheel is turning around. Dharma wheel is turning around. Yep, these songs have to be sung or else they'll be forgotten. Not everybody who remembers, right? So I would like now to invite the bhikshus of the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, should they care to share with us what's happening, any news, what's going on. Jin Chuan, Jin Wei, Jin Fo Shi, you mei you xiaoxi ma?
Nothing particularly new. But we do have the memorial service for Mr. Lapha on January 24th at 4 p.m. If you're interested, if you maybe put your information in the contact form on the BBM website, we can send you a link, or we can put in the chat box, maybe in the Zoom, on the YouTube. I can put in the YouTube chat box for those who want it.
Okay, good. Yeah. So Mr. Ha, our elder, passed away. We're going to do a service for him online. People are welcome to join. And if you look at the chat box, you can find the link. That will be 1 week from today, is that right?
Yes, Sunday, in California. So it's the 24th of January at 4 p.m. in California.
25th here in Australia, China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore. All right. And likewise, if folks want to join in on the daily events at the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, here is the way to do that. Go to berkeleymonastery.org and you'll find links to all of the daily activities of the monastery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's good. How many folks were listening online today? The link is now there in the chat box. Anybody who wants to join next week, the chat box right now on your Zoom link has it there. Maybe we can send it into YouTube as well. Okay, 151 on YouTube. Lovely. Glad you all could join to hear stories of mountains. 85 on the Chinese channel. And how many on the Vietnamese channel? We'll find out here. And I will mention that this time next week we will have a new leadership in America. This time next week, the moving vans are outside the White House as we speak. And the word on coronavirus in America is that by February, another 100,000 Americans are projected to die, which is just, how do you get your mind around that, right? So, as our president-elect said, the hard times are not done. Hard times are ahead. Dark times are ahead. Together, we will get through it. So, keep your mask on. Keep the mantra in your heart. We have a Buddhist remedy for the attitude and the energies. Let's see here. Okay, 9 flowers mountain, Jiuhuashan. 9 flowers mountain. Question, what's the name of the mountain where Bodhisattvas are found? Potala, P-O-T-A-L-A, is Guanyin, Potala mountain. Right? 9 flowers mountain, Jiuhuashan is earth treasury, earth store. Okay, 5 peaks mountain, Wutaishan is Manjushri, Wanshu and Emei, E-M-E-I, Emeishan in Sichuan is Puxian, Samantabhadra. Okay. So, this is a Buddhist remedy from Medicine Buddha by Sajiraj Guru Tathagata. Right? And it's powerful medicine when you recite it with a single mind. Here we go. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Vaidurya Prabharajaya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Vaisajya Samudgate Swaha Bhagavate Vaisajya Vaidurya Prabharajaya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Vaisajya 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 Samudgate Swaha Om Bhagavate Vaisajya Vaidurya Prabharajaya Tathagata Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Vaisajya 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 Samudgate Swaha. Ring the bell 3 times. I'll make 3 half bows. You're welcome to join me if you care to, and then we'll bow to Master Hua 3 times. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Thanks for joining, everyone. See you all next week.